found another and gone away.
In a massive Ford Valdez, and I was teasing him for having this big stupid car, and he said, it's you and Virus, it's your fault that I have to have this big car. I said, how does that work? And he said, well, I had to have enough kids so that each one of my kids could have 960 acres, and I could keep the family farm intact. And he wasn't lying. His 3-year-old had 960 acres. It's not a joke. His 8-year-old, 960 acres, and that's how these big holdings are pieced together through paper farms so that they can still get subsidized water on this marginal land. You pay for it.
Interesting economic argument for polygamy.
And just to give you a sense of that deal, I was flying back from DC once and I tried to figure out what would my home mortgage be if I got the same financing deal that these farmers got. A home mortgage in Berkeley would be $17 a month. So it's a pretty good deal they've gotten in financing the Central Valley project. And that's a federal project.
Do you want to?
No, I think these guys have covered it.
Bernie?
I have 3 suggestions. First, on October 13th, you can tell Colossus in box for yourself. And Jay Morrison is a table. You can sit there at their issues conference at the Fairmont Hotel.
What, Bernie, we're talking questions now, but I'm happy to have you tell us about events in just a minute, okay? Okay,
The other
so.
deals with the fact that I have rights with the Coastal Conservancy.
Right, that's also not a question, but we'll get there in a minute.
Dealing with statewide approach, but it's my opinion.
Bernie, we're going to get your comments in a minute. We're just at questions. I have another question from somebody else who couldn't be here tonight. We'll get to comments. We'll get your comments in a minute. We're at questions now.
Question.
Yes.
Excuse me, Bernie. I'm sorry I came in late, but did the rep Stewart? Well, not by name.
They have not.
Not by name, but they're the Westlake.
Shame on me.
This is an umbrella question, the residents being a huge agricultural landowner, but let's talk about California agriculture. As you said, 80% of the developed California water supply they use. What tools do we have to persuade or compel change for agriculture? How are we going to get them to move?
I said I was going to start by defending ag for just a moment.
Just going to start it.
You know, the governor said urban California, I want you all to save 25%. And didn't say the same thing to agriculture. But something different happened to agriculture for the farmers who get water from the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project. They got a massive cut in their water supply. So on the CVP, they get 0 this year, south of Delta. The state project is getting 20%. Now, so the governor didn't tell them you've got to save water, but they kind of had no choice because they got their water supply cut. Jennifer's right. A lot of those farmers just made up the difference by pumping a lot more groundwater. But that doesn't mean agriculture is not feeling the pinch. There's a lot of land that's not being farmed in the Central Valley right now because of the drought. But as Jennifer said, while salmon have been cratering, while cities have been struggling to conserve water, agriculture's most profitable years in history for the last 2 years. Years 3 and 4 of the drought. Agriculture has thrived, but a bunch of that is because of the groundwater pumping that's happening. So 3 things we could do to start moving ag in a better direction. One is to try to find a way to persuade agriculture that 2040 is just too far out to bring groundwater into sustainable management. And that said, I say that with some hesitation because getting there by 2040 is going to be really hard. And just that 2 million acre foot overdraft, which is charitable, and Jennifer points out that the real number is bigger. And that's every year on average. Bringing that in balance is going to be really hard. So that's one thing. We can just recognize that if we don't come into balance before 2040, lots of bad things are going to happen by 2040. Second, and this relates to water rights, California has a terrible, we're a high-tech state, but not when it comes to water. We're in maybe the 1950s. California should have a system that says to every water user, you're going to report to the state, not just in some water users, those senior water users, they have to report to the state what their water use is every 3 years there are no standards for how accurate that reporting is. California should say to every water user in California, you're going to report, you know, on a weekly basis your water use, and we're going to track that against a database that shows how our streams are doing, so that we really know exactly when to cut water users off. The problem is our water rate system assumes, well, you cut off the junior water user, and then the next one, and the next one, and then the next one. That only works if you have data. California doesn't have data. It makes it almost impossible for the state board to do a good job of, during a drought, saying to water users, we're going to cut you off, and then we'll cut you off next, and then we're cutting you off. That data, you just can't do that. So we need data from all of our water users. And then the last one is one that I've been opposed to for many, many years. I've always hated the idea of California regulating crops in California. We grow 400 crops in California on incredibly different soils and incredibly different climates, and I always thought it was a terrible idea to regulate crops.
Rice?
I'm starting to change my mind. There are places where we've grown almonds for 100 plus years in the Sacramento Valley, and we should. It's a smart thing to do. But in the last 10 years, roughly, we've increased planted almonds in the Central Valley by 300,000 acres. That's 500 square miles of new almonds in the Central Valley. And we're planting them in places that have lousy groundwater and have junior water rights, and we're creating crises. We're creating the crisis we're seeing right now during the drought. At some point, it makes sense for the state to say, you know what, in places where you've got massively overdrafted groundwater and junior water rights, you're just not going to convert crops from annual crops like lettuce or melons to permanent crops that you can't manage during a drought.
I'd say that one of the drivers of the groundwater legislation was the planting of almonds and grapes. Those are the two biggest crops in California on rangeland in the Sierra Nevada foothills. And everyone says, there's a drought, we shouldn't be eating beef. But you know the secret about cows? If there's a drought and it's too expensive to feed them, they go away. So the big problem in the drought is that as agriculture has become more efficient over the last quarter century, they've become much more efficient in how they use water, and they've reinvested that saved water in permanent crops. What happens is you harden your water demand, and so when you have a drought, you have to keep watering those crops. You have no way to fallow it. So last year, about 500,000 acres of farmland was fallowed out of 10 million acres in the state. This year, we think it's going to be 10 or 12%. Those are all, and we're at half of our water supply this year. So those are all really, so that tells you what the differential is. And one of the problems is you've got these crops, it takes 7 years before you get a crop from it, and then you want it to go on for a couple decades so you can maximize your investment. Oh, and by the way, you talk about corporate investors, one of the biggest investors in almonds is Harvard's endowment.
Who?
Okay, divest from oil and divest from almonds. So, Adam, what can we do to compel agriculture or persuade agriculture to change its waterways?
Well, I'm having looked at the politics the last 30, 40 years, it's going to take everyday people getting involved so we can crack a collective whip to rein them in. And part of the problem is, and sometimes I'm talking about ag and they sound like the worst people in the world. But there's a lot of great farmers, and farming, we should have more farmers in this state, more country, farming in a way that is responsible with our water use, providing good food for Californians. The problem is we have large corporate interests like the Resniks. That's how this question, you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Resniks operating in the Kern County empire, which I also call the heart of darkness. That's also what the oil companies are for the most part, and they have a nice track record of polluting and fracking our water, fresh water, some of which is also coming away from the Delta via the State Water Project. So we have the Resniks there, Westlands there. With those guys, on that farmland, that's something where we just got to say, hey, this is crazy. I mean, there's all this salt in the soil, there's no good water supply there, it's hot in the desert, it's all going overseas. It just doesn't make sense. Let's buy them out, and let's also give some checks to the farm workers too, who would also be are caught up in this web of insanity. for the rest of the state, I like Barry's ideas there. The state getting more involved, regulating water use, tracking it on a more equitable basis. Oftentimes, I know a guy who was on a water board, and they were totally opposed to groundwater management. He got his windows broken, and he was on the water board. But after they put it in, they actually appreciated knowing, having that information to help them make plan, help them make better decisions. So it's a battle. Water is absolutely worth fighting for, has to be fought for, and whiskey will need to be consumed along the way.
I don't know, the current rules sound a whole lot like how I report to my doctor my exercise hours and my calorie count. I over and under report routinely. So what can we, how can we influence our elected leaders to do the right thing in this drought? And are they doing the right thing or aren't they?
They did a lot of the right things. So we talk about measuring. One of the things in the governor's drought legislation was to require ag to report their water use. One of the major pieces in the groundwater legislation is to have annual reporting of groundwater use. So I think,
But in the way I report to my doctor.
well, it needs to be verifiable. So the question, and that is the big question, is how do you ensure that they're actually being accurate? And I think the way you figure that out is DWR has their own wells there, and they can see if the water level's going up or down. I mean, you can't really hide groundwater because it's under everything. So I think it will be verifiable. That one of the big areas we don't have a lot of understanding of is the relationship between groundwater and surface water, and especially in Sierra Nevada foothills and the coastal streams. Those are groundwater fed streams. If you see a stream that's running year-round, it's likely it's being fed by groundwater. And those are very important ecosystems that are really endangered by groundwater overpumping. And that's one of the things that the Groundwater Management Act requires, is that a local groundwater agency identify that relationship between groundwater and surface water and protect it. And that's going to be another big fight.
Very.
Oh, I mean, honestly, one of the most important things you can do is tell your local legislators that water is important to you. Water is only, in the Central Valley, if you're a legislator in the Central Valley, your top priorities are water, 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 and on Wednesdays, water. And if you're an urban legislator, your priorities are crime and schools and jobs and on and on, and water is often way down the list. And it's very common for urban legislators to vote against their own constituents. And I mean that exactly in the way I say it, to vote against their own constituents, because agriculture cares so much about water issues. They'll often go to urban legislators and basically say, what do you want? If you vote with me on water, I'll help you on a lot of other stuff. It's very common for urban legislators to vote against urban residents because they don't hear enough from their own people about how important water issues are.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's right, absolutely. People, they have to hear that it's important, that it's a priority, and I think we need to make this connection a little bit stronger because the way water supplies are so different sometimes. I think water wonks know that it's all connected, but sometimes it feels the Central Valley politically, maybe like that's Texas, but I don't think we give a rat's ass about Texas. Or Southern California this seems so out of sight, out of mind. But that's why I'm thinking this food angle is important here, preserving California's farmland, putting it to good use. And I know that San Franciscans care about food. So I think that's an important tie in making this issue really stick with legislators.
So other questions from the audience? Yes.
The governor's twin tunnels will have the capacity, not the advertised 9,000 cubic feet a second, but actually the tunnel's capacity is 15,000 cubic feet a second. That's more than the current average flow of the Sacramento River. A two-part question. What does having no fresh water flow mean to the bay? Second question, how do we convey that to San Francisco residents?
I haven't looked at the latest numbers, but I'm agreeing with your assessment overall. It would be a death knell. It would be the only, I think if you look at the status quo, if they continue to pump the amount of water they're pumping away, it's a slow death sentence for this, well, it might be coming soon. sooner for the salmon, the way they're going, for the ecology of San Francisco Bay. If you want to say to hell with it all, just can't save it, let's build 2 tunnels so we can keep irrigating Westlands and Kern County and guarantee their water supply while we pay for it. So absolutely. The way this project has been lined up, it seems that it's pretty much the governor and his appointee's decision. There's some debate about how much the state legislature has any say over this project. Some people say no, some people say maybe we have some say over the project, but really the political authority mostly rests with the governor and his appointed councils. The Achilles heel of this project, a couple Achilles heels, are some of the legal issues around environmental protection, environmental species protection. So there's going to be a lot of litigation there. The other Achilles heel is the money to pay for this thing, estimated to cost at least $60 billion. There's no finance plan. The big elephants in the room who have a lot of money. Well, the one big elephant is the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which is the wholesale importer of water from both the Delta and Colorado River and sells to the cities. The cities of Southern California are not actually the bad guys. They are looking to buy less water from the Delta. They know they need to diversify their water supply. Orange County's doing a good job, as we heard. They know that their dollars go a lot further if they do that. Yet Met is trying to twist everybody's arm into paying for this thing. They want the water. They have an unholy alliance with Kern and Westlands on this, and we got to fight them on that. So we're fighting them in LA, and Santa Clara Valley Water District is also on the bullseye. You know, people down there, we got to fight them there. And we need to fight and let our public officials know that we care about this, because even though we don't have a lot of political say right now, we need more voices. We need more elected officials criticizing this project, saying it's wrong for our bay, for our salmon, for the quality of life here in the Bay Area.
And when you think Met, think Chinatown.